in Nature called the handicap principle, which actually suggests that waste has been evolutionarily selected for. So we can see this manifest in the human sphere as well. Every year you'll read that they're building a new yacht that's 7 feet larger than the previous yacht that was the record. And you know, I've cajoled with these people, and it's just kind of funny to see the dynamics. They don't realize it. It's like they have like a nail in their head, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm getting to see this nice yacht," and they don't realize how kind of ostentatious it is. Anyway, so this is a very fascinating line of research. In nature, we don't so much care about absolute return, but relative return. We're trying to move up the mating ladder. Not ostensibly, we don't think about it that way, but we do things that give us the same feelings that our ancestors got when we were moving up the mating ladder. This example, would you prefer a 4,000 square foot house in a neighborhood of 6,000 square foot houses? Or would you prefer a smaller house, a 3,000 square foot house, in a neighborhood where all the other houses were smaller? Most people would prefer the smaller house as long as it was bigger than their neighbors. And it's funny, but this is like at the core of resource overconsumption, is we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. And we almost catch them, but we don't. And we almost catch them, and if we did catch them, we'd realize that Jones is an idiot. But Chinese and Indians are trying to live like Americans. And so we're sending them this signal. So in nature, there is a automatic negative feedback to overconsumption of resources and status markers. For example, a lion could not possibly get that third gazelle down. His gullet would be full. A deer antlers couldn't be much larger than that, or he would fall over. But in human society, there's positive feedback. More money begets more money, begets more addiction, etc. Not always, but a lot of times, yes, we do things because we can, and then we do more of them. So supernormal stimuli, habituation, and addiction. I'll just quickly read this to you. It's by this great guy, Stuart McMillan. Instincts have no bounds. Instead of stopping at a sweet spot, the instinctive response would still be produced by unrealistic stimuli. Once the researchers, this is Nikolai Tinbergen, a human ethologist, once the researchers isolated the instinct trigger, they could create greatly exaggerated dummies which the animals would choose instead of a realistic alternative. They've done this in all sorts of animals. Songbird parents would prefer to feed fake baby birds with mouths wider and redder than the real chicks. And the real chicks themselves would ignore their parents to beg fake beaks with more dramatic markings. This is called a supernormal stimuli, and I'm sure you can imagine the ones that exist in our society. But let me give you an example of the mechanism, how this works. So this is a now dated study with chimpanzees that were thirsty, and they put headphones that would play a tone, and when the tone was played, they would get a squirt of fruit juice. And they measured their dopamine neurons. Dopamine is part of the neurotransmitter reward pathways in our brain. Like when you see something that you didn't expect, you get a shot of dopamine. So the monkey's neurons went from dopamine neurons went from 3 to 60 in a second. They were like, whoa, that was great, I didn't expect it, that was really cool. And then they kept doing it, and it kind of gradually went down. They still liked it. But after like 10 or 15 times, squirt of fruit juice, I expected that, no big deal. Dopamine neurons were 3. They very quickly became habituated to something that was once good, but now they got used to. And the feelings of feel good, whoa, were no longer there. So the wanting in our species feels better than the having, and that is a problem for energy and climate change. The dopamine system is stronger than the opioid system, which is feel good. Real quickly, dopamine, Parkinson's disease is a lack of dopamine in a certain area of the brain. And Mayo Clinic did this study on like 100 Parkinson's patients. They give them a drug called Mirapex, which boosts dopamine all over the brain, and it helps with Parkinson's symptoms. but it's like surplus dopamine in the reward areas. And all of a sudden there was these church pastors that had like 7 affairs, and this little old lady lost $150,000 at the Indian casino gambling. And it was all sorts of consumptive behavior that previously didn't exist because of more dopamine. So we think about this, our own behavior, where we are faced with choices every day, a good choice and a less good choice. Exercise, watch TV, eat a salad or a burger, homework or video games, save the climate or go to Tahiti. And when our neural rewards, kind of like the monkey, when they get ratcheted up, our decisions get slanted downward towards the negative choice just a little bit at a time. And eventually we have a repertoire of these things. Okay, so cognitive biases. So we are, optimism is very adaptive. And I'm sure you've all heard some of the statistics. 99.9% of high school seniors say that they're better than average at getting along with other people. 90-some% of college professors think they're better than average. If you think about why that is, you know this, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not. It's better for you to have that fake sense of reality. And so optimism gives you a reduction in cortisol. It boosts your helper T cells, which is an immune system. So to think on the bright side of things is adaptive. It's the natural way of things. So there's all sorts of cognitive biases. One is called cognitive load. I'd love to spend like a whole hour talking about them because they're fascinating. Cognitive load is the ability to hold 6 or 7 chunks at most in your mind at one time, and after 7, your efficacy drops down considerably. The reason I bring it up is because the things I'm talking about tonight, there's so many, but yet for me to leave some of them out, then you don't get the full picture of what's happening. And I've noticed this in myself. I was like researching for this talk a couple days ago, and I found a really cool article. God, this is really good. I didn't know that, and I wrote it 6 years ago. And it's like you can't keep it all. We have 1,300 cc's, and you just can't keep it all. And so what I'm most expert in right now is the stuff that I've read the last month, because stuff that was last year is just gone. I mean, I retain a little bit of it, but yeah. So our brain, we don't have like one consciousness. Our brain is like a lunar module. We have all kinds of domains that were meant for different purposes, and they're all working at the same time, whichever one shouts louder. Eliot Spitzer condemned prostitution like terribly as a moral wrong. That part of his brain did that, but another part of his brain did something else, and we all do those sort of things. We can't imagine what it's like to be sexually aroused when we're not sexually aroused. We can't imagine how depressed we are when we're super happy. It's your brain thinks in the moment on what's important at the moment. So consciousness and how we rationally think about things is not really what we think. Okay, so I told you about cognitive load. There are more biases. There are actually hundreds of biases. And I think the human brain is at the core of our energy and environmental problems. Everyone in this room has a belief about the world. And you believe that very strongly, or relatively strongly, because if you believe what I believe, then it wouldn't be your belief. We all feel very strongly about things. They might be different things. Some things like climate change are incredibly polarizing. And I'm sure everyone in this room knows some people that think climate change is a hoax or whatever, and there's no fact in the world that would change their mind about that. No way. It's a belief. And when you say, I believe humans are causing climate change and it's something to worry about, the area in the front of your brain lights up the same way that a sister in a church would say, I believe in God. When we believe, It's the same areas of your brain that are activated. So this man is one of the smartest men on the planet, far smarter than me.